Right, let's test the sound. You can hear me? Ah, we have an audience of quality here this morning. Thank you very, very much for inviting me to come and speak to you, to the forum. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time speaking at the forum, although I've been in Istanbul and in Turkey a number of times. I come from Cape Town, South Africa, which is where I live, and I am an unusual person. I am a political economy specialist, and what I do is I provide specialist presentations, customized presentations for audiences around the world on their specific field of interest. And as I have a particular interest in travel and tourism, it's a particular delight for me to be here to talk to you. Now, as I was talking to this lovely gentleman who I met earlier, I'm a terrible speaker because I tend to bring a sense of realism to any debate. And sometimes it can be quite unpleasant, I must tell you, because I deal with political and economic related issues. So I always issue a warning before I begin, that if you don't want to hear the political or the economic or the effects or impacts of that, then it may be the chance to leave. But I wouldn't want anybody to leave because I've just got enough people here to make it a warm and friendly half an hour with you. Now, what I want to do with you is to take you through some of the trends in tourism that are directly resultant from the broader political economic environment which we have. And I'm particularly pleased that some of the input in this presentation comes from a collaborative organization that I'm working with for this particular conference called Forward Keys, a travel intelligence company. And the representative of Forward Keys is in fact here in the audience. And if there are any questions relating to the slides that are provided by Forward Keys, and you'll see the Forward Keys logo on their particular slides, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any questions on that. So my presentation is a mix of my own consultancy's research, but also thanks to the collaboration with Forward Keys as well. Now, I'm here to talk about really the impact of politics on tourism. That's, I think, been a very important sub-theme of this particular conference, and I'm particularly pleased that this conference has decided to put that issue on the agenda. It's not just sufficient anymore to talk about, of course, the pleasant aspects of tourism. It's the unpleasant aspects of tourism and the effect on the tourism industry that I think need to be addressed, and at least we all need to be aware of those issues, and we need to find creative ways in terms of solving some of the negative impacts that politics and the broader economic volatility that we have in the world affects tourism. Now, as you can see by the slides, I like to use pictures. There are a lot of graphs, but pictures make it a little bit more exciting. And I think the tourism industry has been under some degree of threat over the course of the last 12 to 18 months or so. And frankly, when we look at volatility in the world, and it's not just issues of terrorism, it's broader issues of economic volatility, currency volatility, issues relating to health as well. All of these issues are going to have a further impact. And one of the issues, of course, that we all cover is the issue of terrorism. Terrorism has been not only in the fashionable tourist cities of the world, like I might say this city, but of course terrorism has affected many African cities as well, from Mogadishu to Bamako, to Jakarta for that matter, cities that are more inclined to be business travel-oriented cities. They have been affected, and in particular, the luxury hotel industry has seen an effect on their security. These terrorists have been targeting luxury hotels in particular, luxury hotels frequented by visitors, and particularly Western visitors, I might add, for headline purposes. And I certainly would argue that if there's anything we should be discussing, it's really the security of tourists. It's not my particular speciality to discuss that, but I just want to suggest that we cannot just go ahead by looking at tourism in the broad context without the additional issue now of security at every step of the way, including the entrance to any public building, and indeed including the entrance to all hotels, which in my opinion, and I do travel quite widely across the world, very often security is still remarkably lacking in high-profile or vulnerable areas of the world. So I just want to say that I think it's an important issue that we should focus on, not one for this particular presentation. Now, the effects, of course, over the last 15 years, 10 or 15 years or so, since 2000 and since just before 9/11, has been remarkable. There's been a 5-fold increase in terror-related deaths since 2005, but 80% of those terrorist incidents or death-relating incidents occur more or less in 5 countries of the world. It's the Afghanistans, it's the Nigerias, it's the Somalias of this world. They are largely responsible for the scourge of terrorism, those countries often destabilized by terrorist operatives and practitioners. The key issue, of course, goes beyond that. It goes beyond as terrorism has moved beyond the borders of these countries, often in the developing world. And the impact, it's the impact of terrorism that really is the issue at hand. The monetary impact and, of course, the bottom line impact, the effect on bookings coming in to your particular industry across the world. I just thought I'd show you quickly, International SOS, the travel insurance company, came out with a survey only a few weeks ago. And they have identified the top, what they call the top security concerns for travelers. It was a survey done, a relatively small survey done amongst 500 of their particular customers, but I think it still indicates quite clearly that acts of terror now count as the #1 concern for travelers or tourists. Second is opportunistic crime, civil unrest, road traffic accidents, natural disasters, but acts of terror, #1. And if we don't get it right in providing an overall environment of safety for tourists, then I think we are failing in our duty. Just have a look to see what the revenue loss for European travel has been since the Paris attacks of November of last year. It's likely to exceed about 1 billion euros. 1 billion euros in loss as a result of that particular attack. That is serious stuff, and it will dent confidence in the industry. Now, thanks again to my partners in this particular presentation, Forward Keys. It's now easy to identify these travel trends immediately. The impact on bookings we can see immediately, more or less. And when we look at Paris and we look at the total international weekly net bookings to Paris, there was the Paris attacks. You can just see the dark blue line indicates that drop off in bookings. The recovery, of course, was reasonable, but still, as we look at Paris more or less now, those bookings for 2016 are still looking below that of the previous year's figures. So a sharp decline in bookings into Paris, a reasonable recovery, but that recovery still hasn't really adequately taken root to take Paris back to where it was. That's serious. That provides the hoteliers and the airlines and all the related businesses in Paris with a degree of concern. By and large, of course, it's not only European travelers. These are the travelers who cancel their bookings. The big area of cancellations came from the Asia-Pacific region, 40% cancellation figures there, large amounts of people cancelling within Europe in terms of going to Paris, but it is your Asian traveler in particular who is particularly susceptible or sensitive to acts of terror. I certainly would argue also that your Asian traveler and perhaps your Chinese traveler is more likely to travel in groups. We know that group operators tend to be particularly sensitive about areas of the world that are unsafe, and those group operators are the ones very often who will take the decisions to shift or move or cancel their particular bookings. We've seen it even in this country, where some of the cruise lines, for example, have decided to take ships out of the Turkish market over the course of the next couple of months. The decision is taken on a group basis, and that, I think, has to be tackled in a particular way, dealing with those tour operators and dealing with group operators and big cruise lines to address this particular issue. Just moving briefly from Paris to Brussels. Brussels, we know, didn't have a terrorist attack. And this was the interesting thing about the Brussels case study, also with, thanks to Forward Keys. The Paris attacks occurred here, but it was that lockdown, that terrible word, the lockdown of Brussels. That's one word no one in public relations or in any tourism board across the world wants to hear. Lockdown. That's going to turn tourists off. And it turned tourists off in Brussels to the extent that that lockdown, particularly over the New Year's Eve period in Brussels, resulted in a dramatic decline in bookings into Brussels. And again, the recovery has been reasonable, but we are certainly not seeing Brussels back to the levels there of 2000 of a year ago, which is the lighter blue line there. And you can see that gap between the lower bookings now and the bookings of exactly a year ago. So there you go. I mean, just by association with Paris, Brussels now has shown a less than satisfactory picture for its tourism, and very similar again in terms of Brussels. Most of those cancellations into Brussels in terms of bookings came from European clients, which is indicative, of course, of Brussels' place as a core European market from a business point of view. The Europeans have stayed away from Brussels without a terrorist attack. So, of course, the issue is, what can you do about this? And again, if I had more hair on my head, everybody, I'd pull the remaining strands of hair out of my head in frustration. Because coming up with innovative strategies to combat the loss of tourist bookings, I think, is essential, something we should all be concentrating on from a marketing and PR point of view. Brussels, as you know, introduced the Call Brussels publicity campaign, a telephone placed in strategic positions across the city of Brussels, where if you felt unsafe or insecure, you could pick up the phone and speak to someone who would reassure you about safety in that city. It's a nice campaign, a nice idea. I'm not sure how successful it is, but it's innovative. And I give credit to Brussels for the innovation of this particular campaign. The negative publicity, of course, about many parts of the world is compounded by the media. And in particular, if we look at the British press, and this is from the Daily Mirror in London, a mass market tabloid newspaper, the publicity is bad for, of course, all countries affected by terrorism. Turkey, I might add here, singled out in red as a high risk on the map, and this, of course, is read by millions of Brits every single week. That kind of publicity, of course, the media play into it. It's a good story, catching headline, as we all know. Media like that. It has an effect. This is an example of an online display or web display from the Express newspaper, also from England. And look at the headline. Would you dare to travel to these ISIS-targeted destinations, with a picture of Paris, and I might add the original screenshot had a whole list of 12 other major tourist destinations. Hardly the stuff to make a traveler particularly confident about traveling. Relationships with the media are critical in this time, and making sure that the media are on board and buy into the need for a destination to recover, to be seen as strong even in the light of a terrorist attack, is critical. But again, look at the issues with which we have to confront today globally. We have to confront the issue of migration. These pictures are indelibly printed in the minds of all of us across the world. And whatever our feeling on this issue, and I know it's a controversial issue, particularly here in Turkey, the picture certainly, I think, has an effect on those intending to visit Europe, and certainly parts of Europe. This kind of ongoing press, I think, is detrimental to tourist arrivals, and we can't just say that the world operates in a vacuum. These issues of the instability in the Middle East, and in particular Syria now with refugees, will have an effect. And we've known, and we heard about it yesterday in the outstanding address yesterday morning, about issues relating to Schengen and the issue of closing borders. I can only reiterate the points made yesterday, that I hope we don't get to a position where the Schengen regime is indeed lost to Europe, and in fact it's more difficult for those outside of Schengen, and indeed for this country, to be able to travel into Europe. I'm a great believer, for that matter, in as open borders as possible, and I just must, and I'll come back to the issue of visas in a moment, but I just must commend Turkey on an outstanding electronic visa system. I came from South Africa, went online, within 3 minutes I had my electronic visa. Outstanding. And I must tell you, and I'll come back to this in a moment, my own country of South Africa can learn how to implement an electronic visa system from Turkey. On the issue of Turkey, yeah, I mean, those attacks, the attack in Istanbul not that long ago has had a specific effect, and indeed a serious effect for the city. And you probably don't need me to come and tell you about the problematic bookings of tourist arrivals into Istanbul. But again, from the point of attack here in Istanbul here, and again, the light blue line represents bookings for 2014, 2015. Air bookings, remember, the dark blue line represents the drop-off in air bookings immediately after that, after the attack. And you can just see that the drop-off in bookings continues and continues relatively long-term. And here we are with the most updated information that I was provided with by Forward Keys, and you can just see again that gap between this year's bookings, current bookings, and of course last year, a reasonably large gap and a very unfortunate gap that I know many are feeling here in this particular city. In terms of which regions of the world were most affected in terms of cancelling their bookings or the drop-off in bookings coming into Istanbul, clearly it's from Europe again, and the Asian market. We'll come back to Russia in a moment, but certainly the European market thinking twice about coming here to this particular city. The one market, I'm pleased to say, which stands up to most terror threats is my home continent of Africa. Africans are much more likely to continue with their travels than many Europeans. I think we're made of tougher stuff, let me tell you, in the continent that I live on, and African travel has remained relatively buoyant, actually, into Turkey, despite the fear of other Europeans coming here. UK customers, when surveyed by Travelzoo, these are UK travelers coming in, deciding what destination they would like to travel to in 2016, again specifically point to a decline in the fortunes of Turkey as a desirable destination for 2016. Perhaps no surprise. Is this interesting to see on the top one here? Look to see where they're going. They're going to the US. That's the big increase in where travelers seem to be heading towards, I suppose for a variety of reasons, but still, again, Egypt and Tunisia barely registering now on the desires of UK travelers to travel. And remember, I'll give you some of these slides. You can email me or we'll get them to the organizers if you want some copies of some of the graphs. Of course, the big issue in this city, and I know currently, and it's a country issue, are the issues of Turkey's relations with Russia, which I won't talk about except to mention those effects of the decline in Russian tourists to Turkey. And indeed, the Turkish Tourism Ministry only in the last week or so said that Russian tourists to this country are down by almost 20% in the calendar year 2015, and down by about 50% just for December alone. That's serious stuff, and I'll come back to the issue of Russia in a moment. In Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, of course, we are all aware of the issues there. And again, look at the costs and look at the losses to that particular industry. Wonderful country, Egypt. Visited there on many occasions. Hotel occupancy in the resort cities of Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada stands at less than 20%. 20% hotel occupancy or less in those cities. And they will lose nearly 2 billion Egyptian pounds. That's more than 250 million US dollars each month, according to the latest figures coming out of Egypt. So it's serious stuff. And again, when we look at perceptions of how the outside world see travel destinations, what are the perceptions? Because perceptions are often more important than reality. I can tell you that. You all know that. I come from a country where there are all sorts of perceptions about my country. Make a real visit to South Africa and then judge for yourself, as I have said to my friends who said to me, should I come? Daniel, how can you go to Turkey? It's not safe. Come and visit, as I always say. The Middle East and Northern Africa, seen as, in this survey by International SOS, as a region in which presents the greatest risk to travelers and expatriates. The Middle East and North Africa, and it's not surprising, I suppose, given the extent of terrorism and the general negative publicity. So, you know, for all said and done, there are all sorts of issues that affect tourism. Tourist bookings, tourist arrivals, sentiment in particular. Yes, it's travel warnings. And travel warnings coming from the major market countries, from the West, from the US, and from Europe, absolutely have an effect. Health warnings as well, absolutely have an effect on tourism. Just quickly, back to one of my favorite countries on my home continent, Kenya. Kenya, as you know, 5-6 years ago, went through a series of bombings in its luxury resorts on the east coast of the country. Kenya's tourism industry has struggled to recover from that 5 or 6 years later. And indeed, I was looking at some of the trends as to which markets have recovered going to Kenya. The Americans are going back to Kenya, good. The Germans are going back to Kenya, good. But the British have been the most sluggish recovery market in going back to Kenya. It just hasn't got back to where it was in that country. So again, strategizing as to which markets particularly need additional help in recovery from these particular incidents is critical to the industry. Again, we are faced with political and related health concerns in travel. I always like this map because I talk a lot about Africa and Africa's future, and it was always important to show my clients that there's a big continent out there, most of it not affected by Ebola. But we know across the African continent how travel and tourism, business tourism, the conference and MICE industries were affected in South Africa as a result of Ebola. And I must tell you, in terms of air miles, as you know, it is closer from New York to Liberia than it is from Liberia to Cape Town. And I know conferences that were cancelled in Cape Town because of a fear of Ebola. Now we have a similar fear and a similar issue that is set to cause, I think, volatility in the global tourism industry. The outbreak of Zika, as you know, is likely to have an effect on bookings. And I put this slide up not to be sort of clever or naughty, but this is what we would call the baby moon market. The baby, not the honeymoon market. There's the honeymoon market, I suppose. There's the baby moon market. Those travelers who decide to have a vacation, those couples who have a vacation before the baby is born. The wife is pregnant. Before the baby is born, they go and have a last vacation until the baby is a little bit, or the child is a little bit older. That market is going to be affected by Zika. And of course, the market of those looking for fun in the sun are also going to be affected by Zika. And my colleague here at Travel Keys informed me only half an hour ago that what was interesting and perhaps distressing for the island, the beautiful, I've been there, the beautiful French island of Martinique in the Caribbean, Martinique is now showing a distinct drop in bookings from its major source market in France as a result of Zika. It's already being felt, particularly in Martinique, because of that strong political and cultural bond between the French Department in Martinique compared to with the mother country France. But there you go. Already we are seeing some Caribbean destinations affected by the negative perceptions of Zika. And I just thought I'd show you, it's politically related. That is the graph of the effect of the outbreak of Zika in its first day or two on airline stocks across the world. Look how airline stocks plummeted across the world in the first 3 days of the Zika outbreak. And I must tell you that it wasn't just airline stocks, cruise line stocks. Those cruise lines exposed to the Caribbean or the South American market also took a major dive. So we can expect, again, some volatility on that particular issue. Well, Mr. Putin is behind me, and I'm not quite sure what to say about Mr. Putin here in Turkey, but issues relating to Russia in particular have an impact on the global tourism industry as well. And of course it's political. Issues relating to Russia's expansion into Crimea, in its involvement in the Ukraine, have an effect on sentiment, not only within Europe, but certainly amongst Russians themselves and outside of Russia in particular. In particular, I might add, the effect of sanctions, economic decline as well in Russia has had an effect on the ruble, the currency. We know that travels from Russia, those Russians booking, are down quite heavily. And I just want to show you quickly, that's the currency decline of a variety of major currencies across the world. You can just see the Russian currency there declining rapidly, along with the Brazilian real, the Canadian dollar also being affected, by the way, not just a developing country, but developed countries as well being affected. You cannot underestimate the effect of currency volatility on the tourism market. And this is both an opportunity and a challenge. And I'd love to see more discussion on exactly how to strategize for the arrival of inbound passengers coming from weaker currency markets. In other words, it becomes more expensive for them to travel, and also the promotion of countries with weaker currencies to attract those visitors who can take advantage of weak currencies. There's a chart of how some of the world's major currencies have performed only in the last few weeks. The Russian ruble, again, I hate to say, my own currency, the South African rand, tumbling in the course of the last month or two. And in fact, this currency, the zloty, the real, the Indian rupee, all having effect. It just makes it more expensive for those markets to come and travel to certainly the EU or to dollar-denominated areas. So when we look at the world's top tourism spenders, these are the people who spend the most. They spend the most. The Chinese, we know, spend the most. The Russians are the 5th biggest spenders globally in terms of tourism. And again, Forward Keys have told me that overall bookings for the last year, more or less, out of Russia is down by about 20%. It's a 1 in 5 reduction in Russians who are making bookings as a result of political concerns and clearly also a weaker ruble. And the same largely goes from Brazil. It's not 20%, it might be about 14 or 15%, but external travelers from Brazil down substantially. And again, tackling those markets, making it easier and more innovative for them to somehow alleviate those currency issues, very important. Now, you know, you don't just live in an isolated world. These issues have an effect on tourism. Yeah, did you ever think the price of the barrel of oil would be less? It would be, well, just about less than a barrel of KFC? Quite remarkable. And in fact, when oil fell to the mid-$20, by the way, the price of the price of the barrel, the wooden barrel, was more expensive than the oil liquid than was in that particular wooden barrel. The commodity decline has an effect, of course, on many parts of the world and also on business across the world. And you've seen, only in the course of the last few days, the results from Royal Dutch Shell, very big multinational, showing huge signs of strain. Thousands will be laid off as a result. But countries that rely upon commodities, those are the countries feeling the effects. Countries that also rely upon that ever-expanding Chinese economy. And that map is a map of all those countries shaded in red on that map have China as their #1 trading partner. So you can well imagine that if China catches a cold economically, then Brazil and South Africa and many parts of Africa, even India and even Australia, will feel the effects, having an effect on business and perhaps over time flattening or denting some of those tourist markets into the future. And I put this into the presentation because it's a real issue. There's an issue of debt, an issue of corporate debt, an issue of national debt creeping into the political equation that will affect business. And it's just interesting to see, I mean, these are countries that have high degrees of debt in dollar denominations. And if your country is weakened and you have to pay back that debt in dollars, you know the difficulty of that. It affects countries' ability to pay. It also dampens economic growth in so many of these countries. China, by the way, #1 there, and we have to watch and flag that Chinese economy because all of us are hopeful for this continued surge of Chinese tourists. Turkey right up there with high levels of corporate debt, but certainly there's no surprise here. Thailand, Mexico, Brazil, high levels of corporate debt, potentially affecting at least parts of their market. The currency, of course, declines not only affect markets negatively, they also help markets. And in Japan, we've seen a substantial increase in foreign visitor arrivals for a variety of reasons. But one of the reasons, Japan, notoriously an expensive country to visit, but not that expensive anymore, as the yen has come down in value, making it a little bit more affordable. And who's going to China? Who's going to Japan? The Chinese are going to Japan in big numbers. And they may not be coming here, they may not be coming to other parts of Europe to the same degree, but they might feel safer, they might feel they get better value, and their visa restrictions might be a little bit easier in now going to Japan. The competitive aspect of the global economy as well is a very good case study in this issue of how Chinese visitors have shifted to a degree to a safer destination closer to home. And look what it's doing for spending, for consumer spending. The Chinese are spending billions in Japan. Look at that graph. It's the increase in consumer spending. The Japanese even coined a marvelous term, by the way, for this boom in Chinese consumer spending called bakugai, the boom in Chinese consumer spending. It's a fascinating aspect. And that liberalization of the visa regime coming into Japan for Chinese tourists having an effect as well. And again, I can't speak too much about the importance of liberalizing visa regimes across the world to encourage travel. Who Who's lost out? I think to a degree Turkey's lost out. I think Europe has lost out to a degree because the Chinese tourists have shifted. But the big loss because of that shift in Chinese tourists to Japan has probably been the Hong Kong market. The Hong Kong market feeling the effects, and retail in Hong Kong, as you know, has taken a substantial nosedive as Chinese tourists prefer to shop in more value-conscious options in Japan, ironically now, than for the super luxury end of the market back in Hong Kong, not too far away from where they come. Quite remarkable shift. And again, just shows you how quickly these shifts happen and the complex puzzle of issues that impact these shifts on visitors. Here in my home country, that's Johannesburg International Airport, by the way, in South Africa, what did we see? We saw a new visa regime come into being over the course of the last 6 to 9 months that affected tourist arrivals negatively into South Africa. We made it more difficult for young people or young children to enter the country with their parents. If they were under the age of 18, they had to produce a birth certificate, a full birth certificate. Their passport wasn't good enough. And that put off family travelers coming into South Africa. The bookings declined coming into South Africa, and indeed the bookings have improved, I'm pleased to say, as our government was forced to relent, or at least indicate their willingness to relent on these new visa regulations, but the bookings are still not quite back to what they should be. And the best way of showing how a visa problem or onerous visa issues can affect bookings comes from our South African Airways, our national airline. And the acting CEO of our airline said in November of last year that the airline recorded a 41% drop in children traveling and 7% less adults traveling between June to September when those new regulations came into being. Just shows you how quickly those visa regimes can affect you. Across the world in Greece, I like that picture, of course. Greek tourism is not in crisis. So all those lovely ladies standing there in Athens, it's not in crisis, but the poor perception of Greece, the economic misfortune over the course of the last few years, problems surrounding banks and liquidity have had an effect on dampening bookings into Greece. And again, the blue line indicates that drop. Look at the light blue line is simply last year's bookings. The dark blue line indicates the current bookings. And again, Greece just hasn't recovered to its previous levels. There was no terrorism in Greece. There was no natural disaster. There was an almost economic implosion and associated negative sentiment, which also causes a volatility in a country's arrivals or bookings. So I will close, in a sense, with just a few tips or suggestions with regards to what can be done or what needs to be done. And this, of course, needs to be fleshed out in seminars and interministerial meetings across the world. Firstly, national and international emergency response systems need to integrate all tourism bodies' participation. I can't stress it highly enough. I think historically the tourism organizations have operated outside of the context of the security establishment, outside of the context of the emergency response systems in any country. It now has to be fully integrated where possible. Countries have to have proactive contingency plans. Don't just wait for some attack to happen. Have those contingency plans in place together with security, disaster recovery agencies, and all the associated risk management protocols that are necessary. It's critical for all countries. Secondly, the public sector and the private sector need to cooperate. That means that hotel groups, cruise line groups, tour operators, inbound and outbound, all need to cooperate to include and foster a better relationship between these stakeholders and the travel state regulatory bodies. It's everybody's issue and everybody's problem. Thirdly, regional bodies and city bodies, metropolitan areas, mayoral districts, call them what you will, all need to combine to create a better understanding between the tourism services and, of course, the security and intelligence services as well. It's a city issue as well, because cities are the ones that are being targeted. And I know there were mentions made of the year of the city. I agree, I think it will be the year of the city this year. But this is the danger for the year of the city, and the city themselves, the metropolitan area, has to, I think, cooperate with other metropolitan areas to alleviate this issue. The fourth key issue is get the data. you can get the data. There are wonderful tools to get real-time data analysis of the effects of the global, domestic, political, climatic, safety, and regulatory events that all have an effect and impact on tourism, as I've tried to show you in this short presentation. The data is in real time. You can tell which market is poor, which market is good for your business. It's there, and it's wonderful. And finally, and I say this because I run my own consultancy business, and I have to be flexible in terms of the products that I provide my clients with and the pricing of those products. I think that the industry needs a degree of price flexibility and willingness to develop innovative recovery packages. I call them recovery packages, which will occur after some sort of traumatic terrorist or economic event, to try and bring tourists back and to instill a degree of enthusiasm and excitement about a destination. And I think these recovery packages, they can be controversial, and not all of us want to engage in those levels of incentivizing tourism to return, but that's something that I think we need to look at. This is all part of shifting perceptions about destinations that are affected by terrorism or by economic hardship. And perception shifting is difficult. It's costly, and it has to be budgeted for as well, and it requires a specific relationship with the media and with the bloggers, I might add, to assist in getting this done. Finally, on an upbeat note, because I tend to often deliver depressing messages to audiences, for all that I've said, we look at a timeline here from the, a very important timeline, by the way. It was from the World Economic Forum, by the way. It was done by Deloitte, but produced for the World Economic Forum. Just to show you, and I'll give you the slide because there's too much information on it, you can't see it all. The bottom line is, tourism is resilient. Through the 9/11 attacks, when there was a substantial dip in tourism, we've seen an improvement, a steady improvement. There have been dips in global tourism as a result of the recession in the G20 countries, as a result of the Eurozone recession as well, but ultimately the trend lines for tourism, despite terrorism and economic volatility, have been remarkably buoyant through it all. And that's the good news. And again, the figure's been used a lot. The projections now for the next year or so indicate a continued increase in international tourist arrivals from the World Tourism Barometer. Again, despite all of this, numbers are on the up. But of course, those numbers shift. They move from destination to destination, to different package, to different city, to different method of travel as well. And finally, there are new markets, I must tell you. And the new markets, I think, will bring a degree of excitement, and I must tell you, a degree of added competition. And, you know, again, we could talk about this for a long time. We could talk about the effect of Iran and the opening up of Iran, not only in terms of offering travel options, but as a potential airline hub in the region, as, if I might say, a competitor hub, not only to the Gulf carriers, but also to the major carrier here in Turkey. These are issues that I think will have an interesting competitive effect on the region, but at least they open up a discussion about tourism, and naturally, of course, in Cuba, the cruise ship companies are lining up to find a new port for their travelers who are a bit jaded with some of those same Caribbean ports time after time. So there are great opportunities in the industry. It's a resilient industry, but be mindful of the issues. It's going to take a fair amount of work to get this level of cooperation, I think, to where it should be, and of course to be innovative in marketing and product in particular, in the light of attacks on the tourism industry that I think we have seen, and I'm afraid to say we will probably continue to see for the foreseeable future. Thank you very, very much for your attention this morning. Well, I know there's, I don't know if I've got time for questions. Do we take questions or comments, or one or two questions? Otherwise there's lunch, I know. So yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the information. I have a few questions. One of them is first, why not
Durdurmam lazım. O kimlikler var burada.
Anlamak için.
When there's an attack in Paris, everyone was crying for Paris. I was in United States in that period, there was an event in Turkey just a little bit earlier, a few days before in Ankara. Many people were dead there, but the US TV and the public didn't react in the same way. My first question is that.
Let me do one. I've got a very bad memory, so I can't remember more than one question at a time. So let me just deal with the one question.
Okay.
You know, I share your frustration. And we on the African continent, to be perfectly honest, always say the same thing. You know, incidents that happen on Africa never get the same coverage as incidents that happen elsewhere. There have been dreadful terrorist attacks in Nigeria and elsewhere. They simply haven't got the same media attention. And there's no doubt that the preponderance of Western media in particular does play into Western issues becoming the paramount issues. And I think we've seen an attempt to rectify that globally by countries establishing their own media footprints or networks. Now you've got it here in Turkey with TRT World and TRT Global that have a more global news disseminating information service. It's relatively new in Turkey for the world. In France, they've got France 24. In Russia, there's Russia 24. All of these countries are establishing their own national media footprints, which will, in a sense, divert coverage away from the Western media models to something else. And I think that's something that these countries are trying to do. But the pervasiveness of media effectively coming out of the US in particular, to a lesser degree from the UK, does, I think, make those destinations the ones that are going to be covered the most. It's an unfortunate, I suppose, reality of the inequality of status of media in the world. But I love to look at media and how media is used globally, not just on terrorism. And there's no doubt that this feature of our life of national media entities becoming more of the norm. On my television set back home in South Africa, I can choose to watch Indian state television or Chinese television, or for that matter, France 24. I can choose to get my news from multiple national sources. It's a new feature of the world, and I think it will shift to a degree the coverage that you find frustration with. But in the medium term, I think those Western media sources will cover Western issues, if I might say, to a much greater degree, and that's the harsh reality of the situation. Mm-hmm. Sorry, your second, I'll take another question, and then if anybody, let me take another question.
If someone wants to.
Yes, sir.
Earlier, you showed us a table.
Yes.
Of 10 countries. You showed us a table of 10 countries, giving the list of countries which tourists spent the most.
Yes.
And when I checked, I took the photograph, and when I checked this, the countries,
yes.
The top one was China.
Yes.
The second one was USA.
Yes.
It goes Germany, Italy, whatever. I haven't seen any Arab countries. As far as we know, Arabs are spending a lot when they go somewhere. Is there something wrong, or do I know something, not correct, not right?
Look,
it wasn't in the first 10 any Arab countries. I was surprised. This is my question.
Thank you. I'm using a fairly reputable list of the top 10 spend countries. I'm happy to look at that issue of spend of Arab tourists. Look, the methodology behind that probably was, and we know this because I've cross-checked many of those figures as it happens. And again, your traveling population in numbers coming out of those top 10 are substantially greater. Now, on a per capita basis, if we had to measure it on a per capita basis, we may well see that a traveler from the UAE is perhaps amongst the top 5 on a per capita basis. But in terms of the general quantity of travelers coming out, and it purely is it's a demographic play, I would say, that's why you see that. But you're quite right to raise that issue. And when we delve more deeply into that, if one was doing a study on, that's a headline figure, we go more deeply into that, then indeed tackling those individual markets, those big spending individual markets are critical. So I take the point, and thanks for raising it, because it is an addition to something I put.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I always like to have issues from the audience, which I will put into the next presentation that I do.
Hello.
Hi.
What are you expecting, hopefully not the future of Zika epidemic, if it reaches other places in the world, people are they willing to escape Zika in the future, and what is its relation to traveling in the future or to escaping?
Well, thank you for a serious question and a very difficult question to answer. You know, the only issue one can compare it to some degree is Ebola. Just because Ebola was a relatively recent manifestation, it had an effect certainly on business travel more than anything else into Africa, and we know those effects substantially. Now, on Zika, it's not a business travel related issue at all. It also is an issue that affects more popular leisure destinations across the world, so it's distinctly different. You know, my own view is that it's too early to really tell the medium-term effects on Zika, but I would argue certainly initially is that a certain segment of the travel population are going to be affected by this. There are concerns clearly, and I sort of tried to highlight it in the presentation, that it may well be more a honeymooners issue, it may be more the baby mooners issue. Those are the specific people who are more likely to be affected here. And I think those are the markets where I would be concerned. So my concerns would go, again, as we've seen from the research from Forward Keys, to certain markets into the Caribbean, which are destinations for young people, for honeymooners, for fun in the sun destinations in that particular region. That's where my concern would be. And clearly my concern would also be, to some degree, the cruise line industry, although the ship itself is relatively protected from the land environment, and it might not affect that industry to any great degree. But I think we're going to see this initial reaction coming from certain markets, and I will follow with my colleague the Martinique example, which I know that, Seb, you spoke also about Dominican Republic also starting just to show signs of a drop-off in bookings. Now, it's not French, so it hasn't got that link into the French market specifically. It's a fairly sort of, if one wants to say, sort of standard Caribbean destination, and there is a drop-off in bookings there. So I think we need to watch some of these specifics. The interesting issue for me is, what does it do to Brazil? That's the interesting issue, and I don't know, because I haven't got any data as yet to show on inbound arrivals. Was there anything on inbound for Brazil? Was there any trend? We couldn't really, it's too, it's...
Brazil is a huge destination, and business travelers still play a major role in volume, so you don't see a clear drop in bookings in the recent days. Destinations like Martinique or even Dominican Republic are more leisure oriented, so then the impact on bookings is more obvious. Yeah, that's your question is a very good one. I think everybody and all the authority ministries would like to have an idea of the answer. I think it's both again a security issue, health security issue, and also a communication issue. So those two components will have to be together. I'm right now dealing with the French Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the Overseas Department, as well the French Overseas Department, and the first ministry which took the lead on the topic was the health, the Ministry for Health, which makes sense. The first reaction was to say, the minister says, stop traveling to Martinique, which was a very negative message. And all of a sudden, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is in charge of tourism, and Ministry of Overseas Department say, oh, watch out. I mean, you go too fast and we need to coordinate our communication. And now they are trying to come up with a better inline positioning, because, you know, there is a governmental source but with different messages, and that's the worst case scenario. So I think all the countries are learning. Tourism is becoming bigger and bigger year over year, so the effect, this kind of crisis, health crisis or terrorist attack or security crisis as a very new scale, and everybody's learning how to react with that. In France, we had another experience a few years ago with chikungunya. I don't know if you heard about this virus. It was more or less this same kind of, I don't like this word, it is a slight malaria, okay, slight dengue, and it was mostly affecting Indian Ocean, Mauritius, and Réunion Island, which is another French tourism department. And the communication was a nightmare. I mean, the way that the communication has been managed during the chikungunya crisis was a disaster. And the French government learned from that. So step by step, I think authorities are trying to improve, and the recent case for the Paris attacks, for me, I'm French, so I see it from inside, and I feel that the way that the French government took the problem was pretty well managed after the Paris attack, and it means that we are all learning. So I'm optimistic the way we are going to solve those kind of issues, but for Zika it's a bit early to know if at a global scale, because this epidemic, this pandemic is already at a global scale, because now we're talking about people infected in Spain, and so it looks now, it sounds that the scale has changed, and it's a very new situation for many countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's that new that the transmission of the disease is still in doubt. It's that new. So I think hopefully we've given you the best we can do at the moment on that question. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Daniel, I have a question.
Yes. Yes.
We've been talking about the impact of politics on tourism since yesterday, but what would you say about the impact of tourism and travel industry on politics? Do you think it's a kind of a soft power which can make any change in the policies and the politics of countries? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. It's a sentiment that's been echoed by a few speakers in the last day or so. The soft power aspect of tourism. Look, by the way you phrase your question, I can only agree with probably with your sentiment that the opening of borders and the encouragement of travel and the freedom of movement in particular is essential in times of global volatility. It's essential in bringing people together. And you and me probably, and I don't know you at all, but you and me probably understand the important bridge building aspects of visiting another country, even if it's for a relatively short period of time, even if it's engaging with somebody just not from your home base or your own immediate environment, the absolute importance of that. And I travel for a living, I suppose, in between doing all of my talks. I'm very fortunate in coming here and going to all over the world. That feeling of a global citizenry is something that I get from travel that I very rarely get from any other aspect of my life, being a global citizen. And there's nothing more important to me, funnily enough, than being a global citizen. I hate being categorized specifically as coming from a particular ethnic group or religion or country of the world or race. I'd rather just be seen as somebody from the world. But only travel can give that to me. And only travel can make me understand exactly what happens on the streets to a degree here, or in Kigali, Rwanda, where I was recently, or in Miami, where I was a few weeks ago. Only being on the spot can do that for me. So, from a very personal point of view, it's a strong part of my philosophy is the important bridge-building exercise that travel provides. And again, I think facilitating the ease of travel is critical. And the responsibility is on a wide variety of stakeholders to make that ease of travel come to fruition. It's in the business environment, it's in the regulatory environment in particular. I get irritated by onerous visa regimes, I must tell you, and I don't mind saying that about my own country, that really saw the negative effects very quickly of just adding a few conditionalities to how younger children would enter the country. I get irritated by that. I get lifted by the ease of mobility into a country, even like coming into Turkey, or getting an electronic visa for Australia, for example. I'm impressed by that. That's soft power. to me, when a country is sufficiently able to implement those particular systems. So, you know, that's, you know, my short version of that. I could talk more emotionally about the importance of tourism, but it's one of the reasons why I was only too pleased to come to this conference, is to meet the rest of the world and to refresh my own views on how we should all cooperate together in this particular environment. Thank you for allowing me to say that. Yes?
One last question.
Last question.
What would be the best... Thank you. What would be the best strategy for a country in order to minimize the decline in the number of bookings due to terrorist effects? You said you can use media, but can you be a little bit more precise how to use media for recovery? Do we need to hide details or everything, or just we need to use media in order to change the perception of the travelers?
Look,
how do we do that?
That is a very good question, and a question we should, to be perfectly honest, we should all be addressing in much greater detail. And this would involve the cooperation of all stakeholders in coming to a global strategy, in a sense, or even a country-by-country strategy, or a city-by-city strategy, for that matter, on how to address these issues. I think there are various ways in which you can do it. Now, I don't think any way is the miracle cure, if I might say. I think you will have to adopt multiple strategies. One, obviously, is media. One, obviously, and I think it's very important today to have that blogosphere that you've got very importantly at this conference, and I kind of like that aspect. I'm into the social media story. I buy into that, and I think they have to buy into that as well. But again, the message has to be a realistic message, not just a PR propagandistic message coming out of cities. The issue of recovery, the issue of how the city is coping, the issue of where it is now safe to go compared to where it is now safe to go, and I think an historical perspective of the city and country and place of incident needs to be conveyed in message as well. So there has to be a sentiment change to the negative publicity from an immediate attack. And I think that we would all do well, for that matter, to participate in a much larger gathering to flesh out those particular ideas with also the assistance of politicians, I might add, and also academics on the particular topic. We can chat about that. There's a much longer answer to that, and I don't want to keep everybody here on that, but we can chat more about that. I sleep very well at night, but if there was one issue in this industry that would keep me up at night, is how to convey that message, that recovery message. And that's, I think, something we can chat about. Thank you for raising that. It's an issue in which I have a strong feeling, but I'm not sure if I've got all the solutions. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will call this session to a close. If you need any specific slides or wish to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn, if any of you operate on LinkedIn, or my details are freely available on the internet as well. Thank you all for your attendance. I really appreciate you coming.